Hey guys, have you ever wondered about the new finishes that you're seeing on the Pro Tour, the wrap around the head finishes, reverse finishes, really interesting new techniques that a lot of pros are using, like Alcaraz. Let's talk about that modern technique and some of the modern follow-throughs and what other lessons we can learn from Carlos Alcaraz in terms of his modern technique on the forehand side in particular, but also on the backhand side. If you look at his swing here, let's dive into it. Look at the way, let's see, this one is a normal follow through. So here we go. This is like a standard forehand. You got a little separation in the preparation. So you see here, a lot of people talk about Alcaraz and his preparation, how he pulls the arm back, but sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he doesn't pull that left arm back. Here's a good example. He separates early, but I can show you in another swing in this sequence where he pulls the left arm back. So that's kind of interesting. He doesn't always pull the left shoulder across like people say that he does. That's one thing I wanted to point out. In addition, because he has a very conservative grip, he has almost an Eastern grip. He has sort of a composite. He's between Eastern and semi-Western. You can see the strings here, they face the side. You have a good angle to see that here. The strings face a little bit down and a little bit to the side, sort of off to where his coach is, Juan Carlos Ferrero here. And he doesn't invert the strings. The strings don't face the back wall like Sinner. Just did a video on Paolini and a number of sometimes it's called the next-gen style, where you sort of rotate your forearm and the strings face the back wall. And that is typical of slightly more Western grips, that's true. But it's not just the grip structure. This is also a style that there are pros who the strings, so you can see here the strings face down and to the side, rather than inverting backwards. Although a lot of people will face their strings backwards. That's an interesting variation. He has a little more classic position here. I wanted to point out this is a neutral stance. Look, he's got a square stance here. You can really learn from this. He's probably not gonna jump on this one. He stays grounded. So this is a more traditional looking swing. Look at this. But still, look how much lag he's getting here. Tremendous lag. The racket's starting to get pulled here. He's opened up his shoulders. You can see he hasn't impacted the ball yet. Look how far in front he is here. Unbelievable extension. Look at the long lever here. Talking about the physics of the swing, incredibly long lever. He maximizes the lever length so he can maximize the velocity at the tip of the racket. Can maximize angular momentum here. So he's way out in front here. This is a great lesson for anyone watching. Try to meet the ball early and try to meet the ball off to the side, off to the right side. Don't catch the ball. Don't get cramped up. So whether you're straight like Alcaraz or you have like a double bend, you can have a double bend here like a Sinner or a Djokovic. Try to have space. Like, look at this tremendous space off a traditional neutral stance here. So we talk about the pros going aerial and jumping a lot, which is very common on the Pro Tour, but you still see traditional setups like this from time to time on ball, especially on balls that are medium height. He's striking this ball right between the hips and the shoulders. This is what they teach in Spain. If you look at this, here's his waist, here's his shoulders. So he's gonna get that strike zone right in here between the hips and the shoulders. So in Spain, they always say, try to receive the ball between the hips and the shoulders. So this is something that can benefit all levels of players. I work on this with my students all the time. Try to receive the ball between the hip and the shoulder. Look at the eyes locked in here. You can learn from that. Keep the head still through the swing here. Head steady, head steady, head steady. Eyes are locked in. That's called the quiet eye technique, which is an evidence-based form of concentration. And it can really help your consistency if you lock your head in there. It can also help your balance and your control of the body. So quiet eye technique through the impact. Look how quiet the eyes are here. Quiet eye technique is based on the research of Joan Vickers, who's a PhD scientist, sports scientist, exercise scientist. And she studied this in numerous athletes, basketball players, originally in golfers and basketball players. And it's a research-based technique to help you concentrate, help you focus better. So very important to have the quiet eye technique in the shot. I would submit to you guys, much more important than the myth of the dominant eye. Everybody's focused on the dominant eye. That's very popular on YouTube. Many famous coaches talking about the dominant eye. It's much more important to practice the quiet eye, not the dominant eye. The dominant eye, dominant eye is not supported in the research, in the literature. The key for tennis is to have binocular vision, to use both eyes to optimally track the ball. It's called stereoscopic vision. The dominant eye is not a primary factor in high-level tennis. It's not something you should be building your technique around. That's a big myth. And I would encourage you guys to not obsess with the dominant eye. Like there's many videos, very famous videos on YouTube talking about the dominant eye. I would encourage you to practice the quiet eye and develop good binocular vision. Track the ball with both eyes. The eyes should work as a team. It's not about one director's eye that sort of supersedes everything. It's all about both eyes. Look at this. This is really fascinating. Look how high this follow-through is. I've documented numerous professional players who are finishing like this, but also an equal amount of players who are finishing lower. So this is what I call cross-face finish. It's way up there. Look how he's going to block his vision here for a brief second, split second. The arm's going to pass higher than the eyes. The hand's over the head here. Like this is really high. Now, you wouldn't think that in the modern game. We sort of, we always talk about how the finishes have gotten lower, and they have. I'll show you that. But look at this type of finish. Look at the gooseneck here and the wrist. It's a lot to talk about with Alcaraz. Really fascinating. So he's got the gooseneck. What is that? That's flexion. Look at the hyperflexion here in the wrist. If you go back to the start, here the wrist is hyperextended. You can see the wrist lagging here. It's a little hard to see in the blur here, but that's hyperextension. The wrist is extended back, laid back. And that's not concentric action. That's coming from the physics of the swing, the kinetic chains. The pull is causing that racket to extend back. And then the racket's being accelerated through, being whipped through, and the wrist here is not actively flexing. You'd think that's what's happening. It's a passive movement. And the wrist extenders are eccentrically controlling this racket head, the tip of the racket flying forward here. This is eccentric control, modulating the tip of the racket. What he wants to do with the ball here, he's going to bring that tip through, but it's through eccentric control, and through passive, the passive kinetic chain, the chain causing this passive movement of the tip of the racket. It's not a snap. It's not a lag. Look at the lag here. It's not a lag and snap, which is also a popular myth on YouTube, and people love to talk about the lag and snap. But it would be much better to say it's a lag and whip, which I think is much better terminology. Lag and whip, and it's a passive or eccentrically controlled movement. So the extenders of the wrist are lengthening. So that's eccentric. They are lengthening and controlling the speed of which he's going to let the racket tip through. I think that's important to understand. And you've got this beautiful, beautiful extension. See that we talked about. Very unusual finish here. High, high, high. A lot of guys now finish across down here. They keep the follow through down around the chest level below the chin. And he's way up here And we looked at some other pros who do that as well. Sinner does this popularly now. Zverev does this. That is really interesting to me, just from a technical perspective. He likes that high finish, and he's got the gooseneck here. And after he goes way up high like that, look what happens to the racket. It drifts down to where you'd kind of expect it to be, underneath the chin. But for a brief moment, he's way up there. He's up in the clouds here, about as high as you can reach. You know, he's like holding up the Statue of Liberty torch here. And he does that pretty consistently. Sinner's very similar in that style. But you see other top pros with big forehands who don't do that. They follow through more, they kind of wiper through here. And you got some of these other guys that really fascinating, that they're wipering, they're like following through up here. What do you guys think? Why do we see that variation? Very interesting. So at the end of the swing, he just tucks in here. And this is where you kind of expect it to be in the modern swing. You expect to finish right around the bicep. And I like to point out the flexion in the elbow flexion. Very relaxed here. Look at this whole setup here. Very relaxed. Everything's chill here. Not stiff. And this is kind of like the finish to the antecubital space, which is the left antecubital space, which is the space in the front of part of the elbow here. There's the antecubital space. So he's close to there. That's a pretty common modern finish, and I teach that finish to players. I encourage players to do that relaxed finish. So he's not, like, he could easily just, follow through right here to the neck, like a traditional forehand from the 1970s or 80s, but he doesn't. He's way up in the clouds here, and then he just sort of like lets this whole thing, I call it a drift. Lets this whole thing drift down at the end, which shows that he's very loose and relaxed, which is a positive. Which you want to be loose and relaxed. Because he has a conservative grip, again, he tends to point the strings down at the end. You see a lot of players who sort of pronate more and the strings face out this way. That's commonly taught too. So he doesn't really pronate here as much as some players. He turns the strings down and he flexes the wrist here. Wrist is down, strings are down. And some players, especially with more Western grips, you see a little more rotation of the forearm, more pronation, and the strings face to the side. That's also an interesting, some interesting variation you see on forehands. All right, we're getting into this really cool, these cool techniques. There's a nice sequence here from Alcaraz. You can see a lot of interesting variations here. So look at this one. He's cramped. He's running to the left. He gets in trouble, and then look at this. And this is what I really want to talk about. This swing. This is becoming a standard swing on tour. I know he's in trouble here. Look how he's in trouble. He's moving to the left, so he's inverting here, getting in. He's going to hit it inside out or inside in, and he still manages to create space here. This is such a good lesson for people. Like, look at this. He's moving to the left. He could easily get cramped up there, but he doesn't. He creates this beautiful space between his body and the ball. Look at the eyes. I talked about the quiet eye technique. Lock in there. Look at the extension here. This is what you want. If you can't get fully straight like this, you can do a double bend like Sinner or like Djokovic or like so many other pros. You got options here, but you don't want to be cramped up here. Wonderful spacing there. Now look at this. Look at this finish. Look how high this is. He's way up. He's going almost straight up. He's going from down below the ball here, lag. Look at the lag. Whipping up, super high, way up, and now he's gonna do this reverse around his head here. Rackets flared back. And then around to the finish on the right side of the body. This is wild. Look at this. This is so typical now. All the top pros are doing this now. Women, men. think it kind of started with Rafa. Rafa started really doing this more than anybody else, and now all the pros now are experimenting with. Look at the end. The ending is straight up like this. This is pretty nuts. It's pretty wild. If you compare this to like traditional technique to finish like this, if you did this as a kid or in like a traditional club, even today, most coaches would say, don't do that. This is wrong. Most coaches would say this is nuts, but this is the modern swing now. And I would submit to you guys that everybody's doing this, and this has just become standard now. Everybody's doing this swing. So I'm teaching this now to players as a variation. I don't want them to do it too much, especially when they're young. Be careful. You don't do this as much as Alcaraz does. He's using this like 50% of the time, not just when he's in trouble. I know this one he's in trouble, but he does it all the time. I'll show you another one where he's not in trouble and he still does this type of swing. So why are the guys doing this? I hypothesize that maybe it's because of it gives them a little more topspin, or they're swinging really fast and it just feels comfortable. Maybe they like it because it's cool. Maybe they like it because they saw Rafa doing it and the pros copy other pros, and you see a lot of mimicry. On the tour, you see a lot of pros mimicking other pros. So maybe it started with Rafa, and now it's just become like a cultural phenomenon on tour. The question is, does it offer any biomechanical benefits? That's a little tougher question to answer. You got to be super loose and whippy. This is a product of being really whippy, loose, and then he's just accelerating up there. He could follow through like here. He could follow through like traditionally on the shoulder if he wanted, but he's just gonna let the thing, increase the pathway of the deceleration here. He's just gonna go up and then around and then flare back, and it's just like a nice. It feels good. I've been experimenting with this follow. It feels kind of cool. It feels loose and flowy. The players may they may like the feel of this. And then you have the racket ready immediately here, which is cool. The racket's prepared. Maybe the pros like it because it helps them have the racket totally ready for the next shot. Look at that. They don't have to bring the racket from here back around. They have the racket already ready for another forehand there. These are all just like ideas. Maybe this is why players like it. But this is like an incredible phenomenon now on the pro tour, where you see players like Casper Ruud's a great example. You see Alcaraz's example. You see so many guys using this follow-through as a standard swing path, not just as a variation. A lot of people say, oh, when they're in trouble, they reverse it. It used to be like that, but now this is becoming like de rigueur, basically standard practice on a tour. Everybody's got to have this swing now. Now here's a traditional one. Let's see. No. Okay, so here's one where he's got plenty of time. I want to point this out. Semi-open stance here. He's got plenty of time. Super lag, super whippy. Look if you can look carefully here. Look at the racket, how the wrist is fully laid back here. And he's super lagged here. Straight arm extension. He's almost always straight arm. He almost never gets cramped. It's such a great lesson for everybody. Eyes are locked in. This one, he's off the ground. Remember we saw in the beginning, he had the traditional one. This one, he's doing semi-open. Both feet are off the ground here. Here he is, crossing face. This is what I mean. He's got plenty of time. He didn't have to follow through like this. He could have done a traditional follow through here. Maybe he's thinking, I want to get a little more topspin. Look at the swing path. The swing path's low, high. If you look at this here, swing path's very angled here. And, he could follow through normally here. He chooses to go, or instinctively, this is sometimes happening so fast. The players maybe are subconsciously doing it. They may not be consciously doing this. It depends on the decision making and how their mind's working, how fast the speed of the game is, and this feels good for him. Look at this. I mean, would you ever teach this in a traditional textbook? This is not. This is modern tennis. It's modern finish, reverse finish, lasso finish. So I call it the lasso usually. Look at here. The rackets. This is wild. Look at this. Would you teach that to your kid? You should now. This is the modern swing now. Like kids are all experimenting with this. They see the pros doing it, and I just think it's important for kids to learn the regular finishes, the more modern lower finishes, to stay loose, and then by all means they can experiment up here. Look at that. Look at this. Look at the rackets, just racket tips facing up here, and then he's going to make it vertical at the end usually, right about here. So he's right back where he started. Maybe players like the preparation, being prepared like that aspect. It feels good to decelerate through here. Feels whippy, feels flowy. And then they're right here. They're ready to go again. Fascinating. If you go back 20 years, man, you don't see a prevalence of this. And now this is becoming so prevalent. Not a lot of people are talking about how prevalent this type of follow-throughs become. Look on this one. He's off the ground again. I would submit to you guys, so you see sometimes grounded shots and sometimes aerial shots. Look how the body's facing forward. It used to be in the old days, you try to stay sideways. Or look at the chest. The chest is wide open here, 90 degrees or parallel to the baseline. Look at the eyes locked in. This is one of the beautiful lessons from Alcaraz. Look at the eyes. Here we go again. Reverse that, back to where he started. So it feels comfortable. Gives you it maybe fosters topspin. The pros like to do this on higher balls. So look at this one. This is a shoulder height ball. You see a lot of reverse finishes like this. A lot of lassos on higher balls. Something I've been pointing out in different video analysis that I've done. So this ball is up higher in the strike zone here. You can see that. And this is, whenever you see pros hitting balls shoulder height, this is a common finish now. You don't see it quite as much on lower balls. Look, you create kind of this, sometimes I call this like a hat here. You have elbow flexion here. You have wrist flexion here. And this whole thing's relaxed. This is the deceleration phase of the swing. Lasso around. Elbow flexion. Wrist. The wrist is just super relaxed and flowing here, and then at the end is always a little bit vertical. You see that the vertical setup. Getting back to the ready position. Okay, here's a low ball. What do you think he's going to do here? Watch how he sees the ball coming low. Look at this. This is a great lesson. Look at the squat here. So squatted position, just like in the gym, guys. Got to do your squats. Don't skip leg day, right? He's got his butt below the ball, but he's whippy. This is the key. Look at the racket. It comes from up here. So a lot of players start their racket low when the ball is coming low. They bring the racket down here too soon. Look how the racket's still up. The ball's coming in low. He knows that. He sees that already. He squats down. It's almost a full squat here. Keep your back straight when you squat. Look at the angle in the legs. He's got like a really nice squat position. Great lesson on low balls. And he could get even lower here. It's not super low. If he was lower, you'd see this right knee would be almost touching the ground. So if you see the right knee here, it's not super low, but it's lower. Look how he's going to whip through here. Look how low the racket is, almost close to the ground here. And watch this racket head whip through it in just a few frames. If you look carefully here, you can see the shadow of the racket, the outline of the racket. Look how low that racket is. That racket's almost scraping the clay. There's also some very popular videos on YouTube that are saying that you don't get below the ball with your racket, or you don't swing low to high. That's not true. You almost always swing low to high. And I can just refute that that claim by so many videos. Like, look at the racket here, super low below the ball. The wrist is laid back, hyperextension, and the wrist is laid back, and there's also a supination aspect here in the wrist. The wrist is highly supinated. The forearm is supinating. The wrist is not hyperflexing, hyperextended here, excuse me. So you have a really big extension, you have supination in the forearm, and then that wrist will start to flex passively as the racket tip approaches the ball, and the forearm will start to pronate. Whether that pronation that may be passive pronation, that may not be active pronation, that may not be concentrically activated. Big kind of windshield wiper here, and then he comes way up high. Again, he likes that high finish. Look, the hand came from down here, way below the ball, right about here, and then he's going to come up, way up here. Look, from down here, the racket is here. The racket is by his shoe. And then he's going to finish way up here. So if that's not low to high, I don't know what we're talking about here. Look at this. Now the racket's up here. So he went from down here to up here. That is called low to high, guys. It couldn't be more low to high. With a lot of whip, and then he's going to let this thing, and this is what you might see at the end. The drift, this is what I call a classic drift. That's a drift finish. I really like this finish. It shows how relaxed and loose he is. So it's a very, very elastic swing. There's a lot of whip through here, a lot of elastic energy. He's loose in the arm, high finish, and then look at this. This is kind of so everybody sees this and they're like, oh, he followed through a low. But did he follow through low? He finished way up here, and then he followed through low. So he did follow through low, but look at his finish here. Just a few frames before, he's above his head. So, and also he's got good spacing. So look at the spacing. So what a lot of players will do is they'll just like fold their arm over, they'll be cramped, and then they'll just windshield wiper over into here. And the whole swing looks super cramped up. And they'll say, well, I'm swinging like the pros. No, you have to get extended, and then you gotta finish up, and then you gotta lift up, and then you can sort of wiper down and across. Lift up, down and across, finish low. Yes, finish low, finish with the drift, finish relaxed. But you still have to extend and be up here first. So a lot of kids and adults, they skip that phase. They just go from like impact, and then they wiper too soon. They don't extend, they don't lift and extend before they sort of make that wiper, the end of the wiper finish here. Check this one out. Fully loaded, semi-open stance. Here, he's pulled the arm back. This is what everyone talks about with Alcaraz. He's pulled the left arm back across his body. So that is sort of like the classic Alcaraz style. But he doesn't do it all the time. I pointed that out in the first swing that we analyzed. Beautiful lag here. Low to high swing here. The racket this is a little higher height ball, but the racket's here, and he's going to hit the ball like, up here somewhere. Right there. There's impact. Shoulder height. Let's see, do you think he's going to reverse this one? Is he going to lasso it or do traditional finish? I mean, I think he could do either one. Just what he feels comfortable for him in the moment. And he lassos it. Like, look at this. He's completely crossed his face. He's blocked his vision here, which I don't really like that. But it happens so fast, probably doesn't matter. The ball's traveling over the net, and he blocks his vision very, very briefly here. Look, you can see the shadow on his face. He's completely shadow. He can't see anything at this moment. The racket's pointing backwards, and he's gonna just follow through, decelerate around his head, long pathway, long pathway around his head. Rather than stopping here, he's gonna just continue on. Feels good, feels loose, and now he's ready for the next shot. So there's this preparation aspect. Come around, and he's just ready to go with this is the classic Lasso ending. And this is the new type of follow through on the tour. And it's not just for balls that are, where he's in trouble. He's got plenty of time here. He's set up. This is just a player preference. Players are really liking this. So many guys doing this. It's unbelievable. It's really fascinating. So here's one where he's on the run. So he was in position on this one. Now he's on the run. Look, run, 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 run. Boom. Beautiful load. Look at the load. Semi-open. Look at the lag here. Racket's full, the wrist is fully extended here. Back. Super lag. Super mobile wrist. And you'd think on the run he's definitely going to lasso, right? No, he doesn't. Look. So here he's under time pressure, and he chooses a very, very normal modern finish that, look at again, under time pressure, does he get cramped? No, he's got incredible spacing. And then instead of, you'd think he would follow, look at this, his hand up here, and then he just barely crosses face, and he finishes to the side of the shoulder, to the deltoid, to the bicep. This is what you see with a lot of modern swings now. He probably tried to drive through this ball more. I mean, I would just suspect that he's on the run, and his instinct, his tactical intention is to drive through the ball a little flatter with the maximum power, and so he doesn't spin it as much. If he was trying to spin it more, I think you'd see the lasso. I think you'd see him come a little higher and then around. That's my supposition. That's my hypothesis. It's a tactical intention here. If he was trying to hit a little more of a spinny ball, he'd probably come up and around like we were talking about. Instead, he does like the normal modern finish, not to the top of the shoulder, to the side of the shoulder, near the bicep. I wanted to point out one very important thing on the backhand, really important lesson you can learn. Number one, get the arms away. So now the extension is flipped around to this side, and you want the arms extended as best you can. Usually at impact, the dominant arm is going to be a little bent. You see this combination on the Pro Tour now. This is the most common configuration. The front arm is slightly bent, and it's a little hard to see from this angle, but the non-dominant arm is straight at impact, and the dominant arm has a bend. And I wanted to point out another thing is look at the wrist, the ulnar deviation here. The racket is up. You can see that just out of the picture there. The racket head is up, and then right before he accelerates through, the racket head will drop down right here. And that's called ulnar deviation. And that's really important on the two-handed backhand. We're talking about different wrist actions. He accelerates through. So the tip is up. Don't bring the racket. I have a lot of players who drop the racket head early. So you keep the racket head above the hands, and then pull through quickly. And the racket head dips under. This is where the topspin comes from. The racket head's now down below the wrist. If you see just a frame or two before, racket head's above the wrist here. And then in just one or two frames, now look how, that's so important. And then so many kids and so many players that I coach are not doing that part. They're just going like here and they stay locked. And they swing straight through from here. This is a big mistake. Look how the wrist is relaxed. The wrists are relaxed, forearms relaxed. That's the movement that everyone's got to get on their two-handed backhand that most people are not getting. Right there. Can you guys see that? And then you got to whip through quickly. So racket up, racket drops, depending on how much topspin or shape he wants. And then you pull through, and there's also lag here. There's not too much lag on this one, a little hard to see from this angle, but there's also lag and extension here of the left wrist. I want to point out another really important lesson is everybody's on the move taking semi-open stances on the backhand nowadays. You have to teach this to your young players. Your kids have to have this. If you're a player watching, you got to have open stance backhand. I teach this to all my players. Look at the setup. This is what I'm talking about. Very, very common now on tour. Very, very important lesson here in the lower body. All right, let's finish up with the last couple forehands here. Here's the classic Alcaraz. Look how he's pulled the left arm across. But remember, he doesn't always do that. Sometimes he has the left arm separated out here. This is the classic Alcaraz start. See the elbows a little bit high. And the racket is, usually he points the racket a little bit forward. So the racket's sort of pointing. A lot of people like to model this now. A lot of people copy this style, which is a good style. To point the rackets kind of forward towards the tip of the racket facing the net or the opponent. I wanted to point out this unbelievable lag here. You can just see the energy, like the kinetic chain at work here. The whip, the looseness, the elasticity here. So he's super lagged here, and then just in a couple frames, look, boom. So from lag to extension, this is a great model. Look at the straight arm. Just a reminder, quiet eye technique. And then he's gonna wiper here. Look how high he does the gooseneck. I mean, this you don't have to copy. This is like his thing. A lot of top players don't do this. They don't do like this high finish with the gooseneck. You don't have to copy that. You could easily do everything he's doing here and just follow through below the chin down here. You don't have to come up. You don't need to copy this or teach this up here. You don't have to come up here. But that's his style, you know. And you don't have to copy this. You certainly don't have to teach this gooseneck. That's his style too. A lot of players don't do that. This is something unique to him. I would not copy that. And then the ending, lower, you know, not to the ear like in the old days. You know, chill and relaxed. It's another open stance, just important to document that. Look at the eyes, quiet eyes. Open stance backhand is the way to go in the modern game. Look how wide he gets. This is the hip abduction that I've talked about. Been talking about this a lot. I work on this with a lot of my players. Look at this position. Look at this athletic base after the shot. Just beautiful. Lazy sets up. Boom. Load. Explode. He jumps a little. Wide base. Look how wide he gets. This is the lesson for everybody. Load, open stance on the run. Explode, wide, really wide. That gives you support, and that's going to help your recovery. Okay, do players swing low to high? Look at the racket is. Look where it is. And this is the impact up here. Come on, man. That racket has way low. You got to drop that. He drops that racket. He's thinking extra spin tactically. When you're thinking extra spin, this is where your racket ends up. Look at that racket. It's down there. And then in a flash, it's going to be over there. The wrist is super laid back, and the racket's super dropped here. Spacing. Traditional finish, like traditional modern. He's high up here. Look how high he's crazy. So high. You don't have to copy that. That can be that could be there. And then he sort of combines it with a like modern lower finish here, traditional modern. That's the one where he's in trouble. I think they looped this video. That's the classic reverse. Lasso. See where he pops out at the end? Back on the same side. Semi-open with explosion reverse. Squat on the low ball, cycling through all of them. Look how low the racket is. This is what the key on low balls. Low balls, get the racket there. Whip it through. Stays down on that one. Doesn't jump. Standard now. The standard reverse that you see all the time. On the run, you think he's going to reverse? He doesn't. Look at the stability here. Look at the abduction. He's going to get wider. Beautiful balance here on the run. Stability there, and then he's going to recover out of there. Really nice dynamic movement there. All right, guys, that's the new. This is, I keep highlighting this because he's not the only guy. I could show you 10 other videos of top players. Casper Ruud comes to mind, who are using this kind of follow through all the time. So we have to start incorporating this and learning from this. This is how you evolve as technicians, as coaches who watch. We have a lot of coaches who like the channel. This is part of the evolution. You teach the new biomechanical and technical elements that arise on the tour that the top guys are experimenting with. You try to teach that to young kids, teach that to adults. Try to evolve. Try not to get stuck in the past. Even as shocking as it may look, this is the way guys are swinging now. Don't stick your head in the sand and say, well, it's not the way it's not the way I swing, or it's not the way I learn. You have to evolve. Technique is always evolving until maybe it reaches the highest point. We're not there yet. Technique is still evolving. We try to learn from this swing, and this is not a swing that is used just for emergencies. This is a standard follow-through now. It looks bizarre if you're a traditional coach or you come from a traditional tennis background. It looks very bizarre. It's a standard follow-through now. And we have a number of other lessons that we learned from Alcaraz, including the quiet eye technique, great leg work, strong base, hip abduction, tremendous lag, and tremendously good spacing. All these really important lessons that he can teach us, and that you can use. If you're a player watching, you can learn from all those things. You can copy all those things. And if you're a coach or parent, you definitely want to try to develop these things in your junior player. Guys, I'll see you on the next program. I hope you enjoyed this technical analysis. It's always fun for me to look at the top pros and see what they're doing and to share my insights with you. Please subscribe. If if you like this content, if you like the analysis, please consider subscribing. We're trying to grow our small but mighty YouTube channel. I appreciate you guys. See you on the next one.